What's up, yo? Welcome to Your One Life. I'm your host, Kim, and this podcast is all about helping you improve in all aspects of your life, teaching you from the greatest minds in the world, and helping you see that when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And then you create a lemonade stand, and you put those kids down the street out of business by undercutting them on pricing, and you teach them the important lesson that business is ruthless, and so are you. So they better stay off your lawn, or you're going to teach them a lot more important life lessons, and they're going to learn the hard way through pain. Let's go. Now, right now, you're thinking to yourself, can I call defects on someone who's not a parent? I'm not sure, but you probably shouldn't do that, because I'm going to teach you an important lesson through pain. Okay, enough already. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about part 2 of Essentialism, which is an important book that I covered in part 1 of Essentialism. You see the theme growing here. Here's the deal. Greg Mckeown has some really important thoughts about Essentialism, and this book is super important. And if you have not listened to the first episode on Essentialism, make sure and go back and do that, because if you don't, that's like watching Back to the Future 2 without watching Back to the Future 1. Okay? But spoiler alert, yeah, the title does actually tell you what the movie's all about. All right, bad example. I'm moving on to this episode about Essentialism. All right, so I'm going to start this section off with a quote from the book. Here it is. To follow, without halt, one aim, there is a secret to success. Now, you're probably thinking this is a general or a military figure, but you're wrong. It's actually from a Russian ballet dancer named Anna Pavlova. But as far as success goes, the principles carry across all different lines of work, all different types of artwork. Principles are principles, and having them as the foundation of your life is what's going to help you become successful. Now, one of the principles of Essentialism is to get clarity on your purposes and goals. And not to be pretty clear, but to be crystal clear. Because pretty clear is beer goggles. Can you see what's in front of you? Yes, you can. Can you make it out pretty well? Yes. Will you end up getting a phone number you might regret? Probably. But crystal clear is like LASIK surgery. It's 20/20 vision. It's what the pilots have as they're flying the planes. And that's what you need, so every phone number you get is a phone number you want. Because it's bad enough to be catfished in life, but the last thing you want to do is catfish yourself. Welcome to my TED Talk. All right, so what you got to do is you got to be crystal clear on what you want, what your goals are, and all your activities need to feed the goal, be specific, be measurable, and everything needs to be towards that one aim of what your goal is. So how do you have a crystal clear goal? Well, your crystal clear goal has to be, like I said, specific and measurable. So a crystal clear goal for an actor could be having a starring role on TV. Now, I myself have been on TV one time. It was an episode of Cops where a guy actually beat up Chuck Norris. But they blurred out both of our faces, so you can't tell that it's us. But it is us, trust me. Or another crystal clear goal could be becoming a doctor, which is what my parents wanted. But unfortunately, I'm a podcaster instead. Let's go, Mom and Dad. I'll prove you wrong. Let's go. All right, becoming a doctor. Going to the moon. Going to the moon was a crystal clear goal that John F. Kennedy came up with. As we were going against the Russians in the space race, he was like, hey, we do not go to the moon because it's easy. We go to the moon because it's hard. It's probably the worst Boston accent John F. Kennedy impression you've ever heard, but who cares? That's what he said, and that's a crystal clear goal. That's what Greg Mckeown references in the book as an essential intent. You need an essential intent. And as you create one of those, what you got to do is you got to say to yourself, anything that does not get me closer to my essential intent is out. Now, I got this life advice from my old life coach who's wonderful. Shout out to Susan Brown. I made a video with one of my comedy film buddies, Paul Wood, and here's what he says in the video.
Don't call them dreams, call them goals. We are done dreaming. We are here to be achieving our goals. And you're probably out there saying, oh, well, how do I do that, right? Number one, write down your goal. Right now, do it. Is this going to help me get closer to achieving my goal? If not, no, don't do it. You don't need it in your life if it's not getting you to your goals.
If you like that, you're going to love the video. I will make sure to tag that in the show notes. Another thing that Greg advocates for in the book is saying no gracefully. Now, I actually experienced not saying no one time, and it cost me dearly. I was actually speaking as a keynote speaker at a 4-day conference. The first night when I arrived, they were like, hey, we're going to set you up to have dinner with the ambassadors, which was a bunch of teenagers, high school kids who, were ambassadors to the program. And at that moment, I was so stretched to my limits. I was so tired, and I needed more time to rest. I needed more time just to refresh over my speech. I honestly just needed rest more than anything, right? But I felt obligated to go to that dinner. And as I was at that dinner, I'm sure those kids were a little disappointed hanging out with me because they were like, whoa, this guy is kind of dull and boring. And I was dull and boring because I was super tired. You can't be on when you're totally spent. Arianna Huffington actually has this quote where she was at dinner with this guy and he was like, last night I only got 4 hours of sleep. And he said it in a very proud way. And she looked at him and she said, hey, you know what? If you had got 5 hours, maybe you wouldn't be so boring right now. Which is cold-blooded, but at the same time, it's true, right? You can't be interesting and fun and awesome when you are completely drained of all your energy. And so what I should have done is I should have told them, no, you know what? I need to rest. I need to be fresh for my speech tomorrow. But I didn't. And because I didn't, that first day was rough. That first speech was not good, not as good as, all the rest of them. And I know very well why that was the case, because of the fact that I did not get the rest that I needed. Now, there are a lot of ways to say no. I don't have time to go over all of them, but one of the big things he says is make sure that people do not take it personally. And one of my favorite things to do is say, hey, let me check my calendar and get back to you. What that does is it buys you time and allows you to say no at a later time without people feeling that upset. One of the things that he does say to do is don't say that you probably can do something. Don't leave people hanging with hope. Don't have them saying to you, so you're saying there's a chance. No, because that actually hurts people's feelings more than hearing no off the bat. And one of the ways to say no is to say to the person, what should I deprioritize in order to do the thing that you're asking me to do? And this is something that you can really say to your boss more than anybody. So if your boss asks you to do something, you'd be like, hey, would you like me to not watch this harassment training video to fix the mistakes that you made? What would you like me to not do in order to fulfill your requests? And at that point, they'll say, never mind, I'll just find someone else. Boom, there it is. That idea is brilliant. Another way to say no is to say, hey, why don't you check with so-and-so? They might be interested. Suggest someone else instead of yourself. Because oftentimes people don't care so much as who helps them. They just want to get the help. Now, not long ago, someone that I respect dearly, someone whose work I absolutely love, asked me to be on the board of his nonprofit. And I thought about it for a second and I just said, you know what? I don't have the margin in my life to do this. I'm so sorry. But maybe there's a thing that I could do later on. And I meant that sincerely. I really would like to be on his nonprofit board. I just don't have the margin in my life right now. Now, back in the day, there was this lady who used to turn down Coretta Scott King and Dr. Martin Luther King, the one who won the Nobel Peace Prize, the one who led the March on Washington, the one who helped change history. She turned them down when both of them asked her to watch their kids. And that's a pretty bold thing to do. But what that lady did is she set boundaries in her life and she stuck to her guns. Now, I believe this lady had a family of her own. And in order to watch King's kids, she'd have to neglect her own kids. And to her, that was a fool's bargain, which is a phrase Greg uses in the book where something looks like a good deal, but you'd actually be a fool to go after it because of what it'll actually cost you. Now, one thing a friend of mine said to me pretty recently, which I think is a great thing to live by, is if it makes me feel resentful or bitter afterwards, I don't do it. And that's a great idea. If it makes you feel resentful or bitter afterwards, the answer is no. And that's what that lady was thinking when she turned the King family down. Another thing that Greg talks about is cutting your losses. When you have put time and energy and money into things, you have this sunk cost bias. I have been through this myself. I used to have a t-shirt business when I was fresh out of college. I saw some people that I knew that were making these funny shirts, and I said to myself, I can make better shirts than them. And I did because I had shirts where dogs were playing poker online. Just kidding. That's a terrible idea. But I did have these great ideas for t-shirts, but I did not know how to run a business. So I ran that business right into the ground. And when I was 2.5 years deep into this business, it hurt my soul to think that all of this time and energy and money went to waste. But I needed to close it out so that I could have the life that I wanted. So when you cut your losses, it will hurt your soul, but it will also set you free. Which makes me think of this quote that goes, you can't move on to the next chapter in your life if you're rereading the last one. And that's straight truth right there. Now, how do you cut your losses? One of the things that he says is pretend like you don't own the thing yet, right? Because ownership keeps you in something. So pretend that it's not yours. And then ask yourself how much you would pay for it, right? So let's say you have an NSYNC mug, but it doesn't have Justin Timberlake in it. Does that make it more valuable or less? I don't know. But ask yourself, how much would I pay for this mug? And in that same way, ask yourself, how badly do you want to be in a situation? And like I mentioned in the previous episode, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. Another thing he teaches is think of your job, a physical possession, or a relationship you spent so much time building, and use zero-based accounting. Zero-based accounting is this thing that they do in accounting where instead of saying how much we spent last year, you just start from zero and you justify why you had to spend that money. So for example, let's say you have a budget and you have money for cigarettes in your budget, but you don't smoke anymore. Or let's say you have a line item for gasoline, but you don't drive anymore because your license was suspended because you kept trying to live that Tokyo Drift life. This is actually a really brilliant idea for all of us to take inventory on our lives. Another thing that he says is to know your default. And one of the ways that you can do that is to pause before you speak and really let some uncomfortable air roll up. But then, in general, what you do is you may know your default answer. This will feel unnatural at first, but it will save you a lot of heartache down the road. And another thing he says is you can actually back out of your plans. You can back out of almost anything that you commit to, right? Some years ago, I matched with this woman on a dating app. We had made plans to get coffee, and I just so happened to run into her at the Kroger near my house that same morning, which was a pretty wild coincidence. Well, I ran into her and I was like, oh, hey, you. And she goes, oh, hey, you, what's going on? And as we were talking, a stray cat rolls up And she starts petting the stray cat. And all sorts of red flags go off in my head. And I'm like, okay, I need to cancel this date. So I go back to my place. I start talking to my roommate. And he's like, yo, you should go on that date. Give her a chance. Maybe you're just being too paranoid. Give her a chance. Go on that date. And I was like, ugh. All right, I'll give her a shot, right? I go on the date, and guess what? More red flags. The whole date was full of red flags. There were so many red flags. I was just like, yo, why did I do this? And I could have backed out. I could have said, hey, you know what? I don't think we should go on the date because you pet a stray cat in front of me. And that is against everything I stand for. And then what I could have done is I could have been like, hey, but maybe you would like to hang out with my one friend who is into stray cats. And guess what? I'm saying no gracefully and giving her another option besides myself. Boom. There it is. Brilliant. Now, the best way to not have to back out of any plans is to not make a lot of promises to begin with. And that's what I do. I don't make a lot of promises to begin with, so I don't have to back out of plans, so I don't have to disappoint people. One time, around that same time that I was doing that 4-day speaking gig, someone had reached out to me and they were like, hey, we want you to freestyle rap at this event, and we're not going to pay you, but it's going to be really cool. And it actually did seem really cool. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, let's do it. I signed up for it. I said I'd be there. And then I was just getting so tired and so worn out. And I was just maxed out to the gills with my job, with preparing for this event. And I had to reach out to them and say, hey, you know what? I'm so sorry, but I'm going to have to back out. And they're like, yo, we alerted the media. We did this, we did that. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to back out. I can't do this. I don't have the margin for this. My apologies. And I felt bad about it, but after the fact, I realized that this was the right decision. And 3 years later, I was putting together a comedy show, and I sent her free tickets to the show. And it felt good to just kind of clear my debts with her. And that's always something you can do, right? You can back out of something and you can make it up to people later on if you really put them in a bind. And one of the great analogies that Greg makes in the book is to think like an editor. What do editors do? They cut things out that don't serve the script, that don't serve the movie. And sometimes what that means is they cut out things that are great. There's this phrase in writing that is popularized by Stephen King that says, kill your darlings. Even when it breaks your egocentric heart, kill your darlings. I had to do that with the script for this podcast. I had this great joke about hemorrhoids and it just did not fit in the script. So I'm going to save it for a later time. Brace yourself for that joke. All right. But you got to cut things out. You got to cut non-essential things out. The word decision means to cut, right? That's the root word. When you make an incision, you're cutting things out, right? And he also says that sometimes you can condense things so that one thing serves multiple purposes. So, for example, multi-use furniture. Sometimes your sofa can also act as your bed when your wife kicks you out of the room, right? Or, in all seriousness, what you could do is you could turn your hang time with your friend and turn it into exercise time so that not only are you hanging out, you're also exercising as well. So think like an editor and cut and condense things in your life. All right. Another thing that's mentioned in the book is creating freedom by setting boundaries. Because here's the deal. No is a complete sentence. So is, are you nuts? And you do not need to explain yourself. You can just go ahead and just say no. But don't take my word for it. Go ask Nancy Reagan. Just say no. to 80s references, and you will be A-okay. All right, so as you say no and as you create freedom by setting boundaries, what you need to do is you need to draw a line between what you will and what you won't do. So for example, I will take your money, but I won't actually do the work. Boom. I call that double winning. But in all seriousness, you have to draw a line of what you will and won't do because people will take as much as you will let them. One of the ways you can do this with people you work with is to say, don't contact me outside of work hours, or just ignore their communication and eventually they'll get the point. You can also take note of the boundary violations as they occur. If it happens from your boss, you can write it on the wall of the break room right next to the employment law posters. And have a plan for those people who are repeat offenders. And that plan might start at putting them in the full Nelson and then move on to giving them drop kicks. And set up a social contract with them so that you're clear on how y'all are going to communicate, operate, and move forward. Another thing that's talked about in the book is creating buffers. In life, we all need buffers. We all need extra margin because here's the deal. Things always take longer than we think they will. Without fail. Maybe 50% more time, maybe 100. So what you need is you need margin in your life. And as you create buffers, you also need to expect things to go wrong. You need to carry jumper cables. You need to carry a battery pack. You need to have multiple flashlights in your life. And you also need the metaphorical version of that as well. Because think about this. What if the NFL only had one ball that they played with? If that were the case, we would never have Deflategate. Brought to you by Tom Brady. You need to plan for bad things happening because here's the deal. What if we were going camping and you asked me, how much toilet paper am I bringing? And my response to you was, just enough. You would be like, well, how much is just enough? Right? If I'm going camping, I want at least one roll of toilet paper per minute that we're out there. Okay? That's how much toilet paper we need to bring. So, I think you get the point. Make sure you create buffers. Make sure that you have more than what you need. So when you need, you will have. And also, another idea from the book is to remove obstacles. One of my favorite stories from the book is where this one guy, I believe he was taking a group of Boy Scouts out hiking, and kids were being left behind. And so what he decided to do is he decided to take the slowest hiker, take all of his gear out of his bag, put it in the bag of the fastest hiker, and put the slowest hiker in the front of the pack. And then he arranged all the boys in order from the slowest to the fastest so that no kid would be left behind. And I believe he gave extra weight to the boys who were the most fit. And of course, the fast hikers got the extra exercise that they needed. That's what you get for being fit, kids. What was this guy doing? He was removing the bottleneck. And we all need to remove the bottlenecks in our own lives. So ask yourself, what are the things that slow me down? It might be a person, but it also might be yourself. For me, my perfectionism is a bottleneck. And I know that I need to stop being such a perfectionist in order to make things happen. So ask yourself, what's slowing you down and figure out how to move forward so that it doesn't. For those of you who are parents, you might have gone to Disney World with your kids and your kids slowed you down. So here's the solution. Leave your kids at home and go to Disney World with your spouse. Just y'all two. Boom. That's a problem solved. By the way, in case you're wondering, yes, I do have a program on parenting. It's called Convenience Now, Therapy Later. You're welcome. All right. So another thing that he talks about in the book is celebrate small wins. Because the most important motivation is progress. So learn to celebrate little things so that you can keep moving, keep that positive energy going. And he says you need to create an MVP, a minimal viable product, which is basically you doing a small version of the thing that you're trying to do big time just to get a feel for progress and making things happen. So let's say you're interested in creating a podcast. Well, what you could do is you could just start a podcast on your phone and create 2-minute long episodes and then send it to your friends, right? That way you're not doing this full-on thing called a podcast, which is a lot of work, but you're still creating something and you are getting that progress and those repetitions in to make things happen. And even with these scripts that I write, I don't do it all in one go. I work on it and then I rewrite and then I rewrite. And because I'm making progress on each script, it feels good. And that helps me to move forward in making this podcast. And in the book, he references having a visual reminder. He brings up that whole idea that Jerry Seinfeld did with his calendar on the wall with the unbroken chain of joke writing, which is also referenced in the book Atomic Habits and my episode on Atomic Habits, because that stuff works. Having a visual reminder of your progress helps you to move forward. All right, let me summarize the first part of this section. You gotta learn to say no to them things that do not feed all your goals. Basically, you need to know how to say no. I'm saying that you need to cut your losses because it is just time to move on with your life. That is the best way to live. You got to create limits on people that you have to interact with because they will take too much and you will feel oh so stressed. You need some buffers up in your life so that you will have time to go and take the slowest hiker and put them in the front of the line. Celebrate small wins, that's what you do, because motivation is good. Chart your progress up on your wall to pump you up some more. Another thing that Greg talks about in the book is to design a routine. You need routine, because here's the thing about routine. It might sound boring, but when you have a routine and when something is set, you don't have to make decisions, and that frees up mental space. And freeing up mental space is like when you drive the same route all the time. You don't have to think about it, and it feels really good. But when you don't have a routine, it's like going somewhere new, right? You have to pay attention to the GPS. You're stressed out that you're going to miss a turn. You're stressed out. And then you start road raging, and that is not a good place to be. Because the beauty of having a routine is you don't have to make decisions. The last thing that any of us need is another decision to make. We need to be on autopilot so we can protect our energy. Energy is so super important. So have a routine. There's this author in the book who says, I write every single time that motivation strikes. Thankfully, motivation strikes every day at 9 a.m. That's what you need. You need a routine. You need structure in your life to do the things that you want to do. And you can have a routine that's different every day. That's what Jack Dorsey, the former CEO of Twitter, does. He has a different routine every single day, Monday through Friday, but he does the same thing every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday, so on and so forth. So here's what you could do. You could do the same thing. So for example, Monday, what do you do at work? You put out fires. Tuesday, what do? You draft your resignation letter. Wednesday, what do? You celebrate hump day. Thursday, you go around and ask everyone, is it Friday yet? And on Friday, you watch the clock until it's 5 p.m. Boom. Different routine every day. That's how you win. Hopefully this isn't your life. But in all seriousness, you need a routine. You need structure. All right, so we're on the final stretch. One of the things that he says is ask yourself the question, what's important now? What's important now? And your job is to figure out at any given moment what's important now. I find myself asking myself this question all the time now. And all I do is say, I want to win, WIN, what's important now? What's important now? That's the question that I'm asking. What's important now? Yo, I'm just tasking you to understand. You need to ask that question. What's important now? It's a part of the lesson. What's important now? That's what I'm just saying. What's important now? I hope it's staying up in your mind because it's the only thing that matters. Ask what's important now and your dreams will be captured. So, what's important now? That's it. That's the only thing you focus on. And how do you focus on what's important now? Well, here's a couple things that he says to do. Make a list of everything that's on your mind and cross off what's not essential. For example, the legality of what you're doing. Now, in all seriousness, making the list will help you to get it down on paper, and getting it down on paper is going to help you to win. So, another way is to ignore your future by writing down everything on your mind. And also, as you write things down that you actually have to do, prioritize your list. So your list might run like this: stop, drop, shut them down, open up shop. That actually sounds like Amazon.com's business strategy, by the way. I wonder, is Jeff Bezos a DMX fan? Was he fresh out of college, created a lemonade stand, put a bunch of kids out of business, and said, this is the way? But in all seriousness, you got to create your priorities, and you got to learn to pause your brain. You need to learn to stop thinking about things, relax, let go, and this is easier than it sounds, but it's something that I'm actually going to start doing and start practicing. If nothing else, it's a valiant effort of trying. All right, so bringing it all in, he says, think of essentialism as something that you are. A simpler way of living your life. And some people he references is Gandhi, Steve Jobs, and of course Warren Buffett, who was referenced earlier. Think of this as a way to live, and ask yourself this question all the time. Is this the highest contribution of what I should be doing? Or am I trying to do everything? Am I trying to create the album of the year? Or am I gluing sequins onto a dress? And ask yourself the question, is this essential to what I want to accomplish? And in the book, he jokes around and says that he's worried that it's going to say on his tombstone, he checked email. Right? Is that what you want on your tombstone? They checked Facebook. They like cat memes. No, that's not what you want. And so you got to eliminate the non-essential stuff out of your life. And to quote someone that I think is awesome, don't get lost in the comments section of life. Lin-Manuel Miranda. And as you go through your days, as you seek dopamine, which is something that we all want in our lives, learn to either get it from good things or just to say no to dopamine so that you can focus on what's essential. Because it's important to focus on one priority until it's done. Right? Imagine if Leonardo da Vinci, instead of painting the Last Supper, he did what people asked him to do. And people were like, hey man, paint me a bowl of fruit. Hey, paint my toenails. Paint my house. No, that's terrible. Leonardo da Vinci focused on his goals, which is to paint the Last Supper. And think about all the cool memes that came from the Last Supper. So you got to turn down invites, you got to turn down opportunities, and you got to focus. Focus on the most important priority until it's done. And if you do this, you will have more clarity, you will feel more in control of your life, and you'll feel more joy in the journey, and you will live a life without regrets. And that's what we all want, to have joy and to have no regrets. You need to focus on the things that are oh so important. You need to take this on as a way of life and you will win. So focus on the things that are the very best to do, so you will have a life of joy and live with no regrets. All right, so that's that. That's the end of the episode. Before I wrap up, some of you may be thinking to yourself, why does he only sing old songs? Well, the thing about old songs is they're not copywritten. And I'm not trying to get my podcast shut down, so I can only sing songs that are over 100 years old, which is why I'm singing the ballad about your mom. I'm just kidding. But in all seriousness, that is why, if you are a musician, I would love to connect with you. If you want me to sing your melodies on the podcast and give you a shout out and help you grow your fan base, I would love that. Just reach out to me via the email that is provided in the show notes. All right. So that's the end of the episode. If you found this episode and this series helpful, please make sure to share it with someone that you think will benefit greatly from it. And thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed and got a lot out of this episode. I hope you have a great day, a great week. Please apply the principles of essentialism in your life so that you can enjoy your life and have a life of deep meaning and, of course, joy. This is Your One Life. I'm your host, Kim Young Kim. Until next time. Peace.